All right, so you guys ready to go into part three of Phylum Chordata? So part one and two, we were looking at general features of the phylum, and then within the phylum, the three different subphylum, and the main focus is going to be on subphylum Vertebrata. We'll put something into the vertebrates. Once we're a vertebrate, then we want to start dividing you up into groupings. We'll just call them groupings. Some level classification. Sometimes it's called the classes. We're just going to go with groupings at this point. Jawless fish are one grouping. These guys were the earliest ones out there. They did well for millions and millions and 100+ millions of years. They're still here today, but their diversity has declined because they basically got outcompeted by the next group. This is the jawed fish. So the evolution of jaw structures took place roughly 445-ish million years ago. And what started happening is that cartilaginous structure, the arch support in the gills, started to calcify in some individuals. This genetic trait got passed on, and it got passed on, and it got passed on. And as that jaw structure started to become more durable and solidified, it gave the animal greater biting power. So again, think about competition. That's really what I want you guys to focus on with this stuff is if you and your buddy are both swimming up to a rotting carcass of food, and that individual next to you suctions on and has to twist to pop a chunk off to feed, but you can go in and take a bite down. Think about who's going to get more food. More food means more energy. More energy means more potential for reproduction. If you're biting and or sucking on and twisting, you're going to stay at that carcass longer, which might mean a predator has a better chance of getting to you and killing you versus if I can go in and bite and leave. If I can bite you, then I actually can now become a predator. I don't have to worry about a rotting carcass. I can adapt and evolve to different food sources. So this evolutionary change from jawless to jaws changes fish. One of the groups of fish I want you guys to be familiar with is actually an amazing group here, are the chondrichthyes. Chondrichthyes include the sharks, the rays, and the skates. So all the different types of sharks, stingrays, and then the skates. The earliest sharks evolved around 400 million years ago. And what we saw was this increase in the jaw size and the jaw function. So bigger jaws, we can now smash and bite down better. So you look at this early prehistoric shark, this picture here, and the body plan is kind of similar to that early jawless fish. Back here, everything's pretty similar. The main difference is up in the head. So now I can bite down instead of sucking and twisting. So sharks, between 360 to 280 million years ago, became the dominant predators in the oceans of the world. They were, well, they still are amazing creatures. I encourage any of you who have the interest, study sharks. A former student from Lincoln Land came on the marine biology trip with me. His name is Jake Jerome from Riverton. He is a shark biologist in Miami, Florida. Does some amazing work with sharks. All right, but if we go back in time, 300+ million years ago, we saw sharks in the ocean called Megalodon. So these are huge. Megalodon was a dominant predator. So we can extrapolate information about shark size based on the tooth. So if you take the tooth and you know the species of shark it came from, the number of inches or centimeters in tooth size can determine how big that shark was. So these are modern shark teeth. This is a Megalodon tooth. Here's a modern shark jaw. Here's a Megalodon shark jaw. it was big enough it could swallow you whole. So if Megalodon existed today, this is the ratio you would be looking at. There's a surfer, there's Megalodon. One swallow and you're gone. You wouldn't even be bitten. You'd just be swallowed. So chondrichthyes are awesome creatures. Beautiful, incredibly important creatures in the ocean today. Sadly, hundreds of millions of sharks a year are killed for their fins. We'll get into that with ecology. These are animals that might only give birth to 1 or 2 babies. And we don't know a lot about sharks. So we're losing a major resource in the ocean and a critical species or group of species without even understanding what they do. But for sharks, let's look at some of their key features. What makes, or actually chondrichthyes, what makes a chondrichthyes different than the other fish? Start with, chondrichthyes all have a cartilaginous skeleton. So they don't have bones, they have cartilage. So the skeleton is soft, which makes it difficult because when they die, they decompose pretty rapidly. So trying to get lots and lots of good fossils of sharks is difficult. We do have a good record of teeth and jaws, but the skeletons are difficult to obtain just because they're cartilage, like the stuff in the tip of your nose or your ears. It decomposes rather quickly. The teeth, though, teeth are amazing. The teeth are shed during their lifetime. So they're constantly losing teeth. They bite into something, a tooth may pop out. So imagine that. Imagine if you popped your tooth out while you're eating an apple. That'd be crazy. Generally, they have 20 rows of teeth in their mouth. And over the course of a lifetime, they can go through 20,000 teeth in their lifetime. So that is just insane to think about, 20,000 teeth through your life. But they're constantly having new rows of teeth roll up and take the place of the ones getting knocked out. It's almost like a miniature little conveyor belt in their mouth. The skin is actually made up of I'll call tooth-like scales here. They're what we call placoid scales. So if you ever have the opportunity to touch a shark or a preserved shark specimen, you'll run your hand one way and the skin is smooth if you're going like this because you slide over the top of the scales. If you go the opposite direction, it's going to feel rough because you're going to hit the point of the scales. So phenomenal for decreasing water resistance. Water, the head of the shark would be over here. Water flows right over the top of those scales as the shark is swimming. Makes them unbelievably aerodynamic in the water. Members of chondrichthyes have a thing known as a lateral line. This is what they use to detect water pressure. So as they can feel vibrations and movement in the water. It's one of the things they use for hunting prey. And then when it comes to reproduction, sharks are sexual reproducers. So we have no asexual reproduction here. And they have a variety of different ways of giving birth. The video here shows lemon sharks giving birth. Some sharks give live birth, where the baby develops internally and they give birth to 1 or 2 pups. Others will lay eggs, but very, very limited number of offspring. What's crazy, the tiger shark, mama will get pregnant and then she will have 2 or 3 eggs developing internally. The dominant one develops and it eats its sibling in utero. So imagine if you were a twin, and I know there's some of you in the class that are twins, and one of you ate the other one while your mom was pregnant. The strongest comes out and survives. Talk about natural selection. The strongest individual is born every year or every time a shark gives birth. that ensures strong individuals in the population. Crazy to think about. So, all right. Also within chondrichthyes are the rays and the skates. So this is a spotted eagle ray. I actually took that picture snorkeling in Belize on one of the marine biology trips. This is a skate. So very similar. Instead of fins going up and these short pectorals, they have, we call them wings, these big, beautiful wings that come out of their body that they use to glide and just propel themselves through the water column. About 248 million years ago is when the skates and the rays started to appear and diversify. We see stingrays and skates out there today. By and large, these guys all feed off of crustaceans and mollusks. They do not attack people. They're not predators to people. They're not predators usually to any fish or anything like that. They're primarily just feeding off of crustaceans and mollusks. The jaw structure is actually on the bottom of the mouth, facing down to the water or down to the bottom. So they'll just swim along, burrow into the sand, dig up a little crustacean, suck it in, and grind it up in their jaws. So they don't have these big, sharp, scary teeth like the sharks do. Some of you may know or be familiar with Steve Irwin, crocodile guy who got killed by a stingray. That was not the stingray attacking him. It was an unbelievably unfortunate accident. It was a defensive move on the stingray's part. You know, whipped the tail up to defend itself, hit Irwin in the chest, and they were in the middle of nowhere in the ocean. They couldn't get him to medical help in time, and unfortunately, he passed away. But these fish have an important ecological role in the ocean today. All right, so those are chondrichthyes. Now we're going to talk about the bony fish. These are all fish that have slightly different features, different structures that give them their uniqueness. So bony fish evolved around 400 million years ago. One of the big key features, well, there's a couple here. First big key feature, they have a skeleton made of bone. So instead of cartilage, it's actually bone. They have this thing called a swim bladder. The swim bladder gives them buoyancy in the water. It's like an internal life jacket that they can inflate and float up, they deflate, they float down. Sharks and rays, they don't have this. That's why sharks and rays are either constantly moving or they sit flat on the bottom. You don't see a shark hovering in the water column like a bony fish can do. Another big feature of bony fish is they have a structure known as an operculum. This is a bony covering over the top of the gills. It can be used for protection of the gills and then also for pumping water across the gills to help move water and oxygen across the gills so the fish can breathe. So a big difference between the bony fish and the cartilaginous fish. Cartilaginous fish are usually swimming around constantly to move water across their gills so they can breathe. Or they can lay down on the bottom, but they need to be pushing water across their gills. A lot of times sharks will lay down, certain like nurse sharks will sit on the bottom of the ocean and they'll find where a water current is coming across a certain part of the ocean and just lay down in it and have that water flow across their gills. It's like laying in the breeze outside. As long as that water is moving across their gills, they can get oxygen from it. Bony fish can sit in stagnant water that does not have a current, and they can push water across their gills with that operculum. This guy here, this fish, this is called a spotted drum. This is just my personal preference. I think this is the most beautiful fish on the coral reef. This is a juvenile version. They just have these big, beautiful flowing fins here. And they'll just sit there in the water column. The fins will wave back and forth. Just an incredible fish to observe if you ever have the opportunity to go snorkeling or diving. Okay, so we'll wrap up bony fish in the last part of the lecture here.